today I'm going to be making some apple pie. And not just any old apple pie either. I call this my deep dish butter crust honey apple pie. That's a long name, but there's a lot in there. There's a lot packed in that name. So here's what that means. So deep dish, a lot of pies are, about that for a pie. I like to use a deep dish. That makes the pie a lot more luxurious. You get a lot more bang for your buck in a deep dish pie. Deep dish butter crust. Most pie you'd make with a lard or shortening crust. Lard crust is a very good crust. My mother made lard crust pies for years and years. She made some of the best pies I've ever had. But I recently discovered from an online chef, or a TV chef, online chef, Anna Olson. She makes some good stuff. And she was making some butter crust pie. Rather than using lard or shortening, she used butter. So I tried that and it turned out really nice. So I started making this pie with butter crust. It's a little more challenging to work with, but you can do it. And the other one, honey apple pie, is of course I use my honey as a sweetener for the apple filling. So I use Macintosh apples for this, and I usually make a batch for 2 pies. So that's what I'm about to do here today. And again, I give at least 1 pie away to friends. I've got some friends down the road, they really love my apple pie, so I give them one, and we'll enjoy one here at the house. It's not as high in carbs per serving as the caramels are, and I do eat a few of the caramels, but not very many. So that's where the pie goes at this time of year. So we'll show you the process, what I'm doing here to make this pie. And if you've never made, if you make pie and you buy pie crust, I'd encourage you to try to make your own pie crust, because it's really not hard to make a good pie crust. And I'll kind of detail that. You don't have to make a butter crust pie crust to make a good one, but I'll kind of tell you, what I've learned and what I know about making pie crust. It's really not that hard. You can do it at home. So follow along. Thanks for joining me. My recipe, as mentioned, you can find this online. Anna Olson's Blue Ribbon Apple Pie. I've made a few small changes. This recipe yields 1 pie, as far as I make it anyway, and so I double this so I can make 2 pies. And so what I start with is 5 cups of flour. You can use all-purpose flour. I'm using cake and pastry flour because I have it. I think it's just a finer sift, really, is what the difference is. Recipe, 2 tablespoons of sugar. So what I've done is I've taken some honey and I've warmed it in the microwave so it's a nice and, low viscosity. I've put 2 teaspoons of salt in with the flour already. 1/3 cup of vegetable oil. I'm going to try to mix that with the honey, just to keep the viscosity down, and that will help it mix into the flour better. If you just put honey in there, all you're going to end up with lumps of honey. Now the butter, and this is kind of where the work begins. I can put this honey and oil mixture in here. I'll mix the salt in first. And then put the honey and oil in. Didn't really mix that well. That's what it is at this point. I'll try to mix that in a bit. Get it distributed throughout the flour. You don't want one bite of pie crust to be sweet and the next to be bitter. All right. Now, I use an entire pound of butter for this. My wife is running support for me, which is nice. She's a big help when it comes to making this pie. And what I'll do with the butter is I just start shaving it off into the flour. Just shave pieces off. I'll do about half of this pound. And now just a common pastry blender thing. You just want to cut that butter up into chunks, small pieces. Now here's the secret with pastries and whatnot, is you do not want to fully blend your lard, shortening, butter, whatever you're using. You want it to remain in chunks, small chunks, but chunks no less. Okay, so you can kind of see there, size of chunks we're dealing with. That's perfect. Now I believe what happens is when you bake that, all of those little pockets of fat, you think about a deep fryer. So you think about a deep fryer, and that you put something breaded or French fries or whatever you're putting in a deep fryer is surrounded by fat, and it's the hot fat that cooks whatever it is you put in there. And what we're doing here is we're putting the fat inside the thing that we're cooking, right? So I've got a dough crust, a pie crust made of dough, which is flour, etc. And when I bake that in the oven, that fat will get hot and it will begin to cook that dough from the inside. And that's what makes the pockets in the pastry, so that then it's flaky. It's not just a piece of shoe leather or something. So the key with pie dough is you want to work it as little as possible. You don't want to overwork it. You overwork it, it becomes tough. It just becomes a flabby sheet of dough. And you don't want a flabby sheet of dough. You just want a nice flaky pastry. So you have to get the butter cut up and mixed. As soon as you cut it, then it comes in contact with the flour, and it tends not to recongeal, re-stick to each other again, stick to itself again. These cutters are very flimsy. It's really easy to bend these cutting knives doing this. And for most of my life, I've made pie using lard, and it is a little bit easier because it's a little softer, and it breaks down and is a little easier to work. Seems to be more moist, and allows the dough once I start working the dough, it's a little more pliable and elastic. The butter tends to be a little more brittle, if I can call it that. Okay, so it's pretty good. It's fairly coarse. You know, I don't want the pieces to be too big. Some of those are a bit big, so we'll go back. So if you're not making pie crust at home, this is a really great place to start. And I don't know if this is available everywhere, but this is available where I am. It's lard, so it's animal fat, it's pork fat. And there's a really great pie crust recipe right inside the lid here. If you open that up, it goes on all the way down in there. It tells you how to make a pie crust. It's really great. And that's essentially the recipe my mother used. I've got about a half a cup of water here, and everything gets flour on it. And I want 4 teaspoons of lemon juice in the water. I know that 3 teaspoons is a tablespoon, so we'll put a tablespoon and a teaspoon in there. This is a handy tool when you're doing pie crust. So I don't know, I call it a dough knife or pastry knife or something. It just helps you scrape your work surface and cut the dough and whatnot. Okay, this is where things get messy. I'm going to pour that water and lemon juice mixture in here. And mix that up. And I know generally I end up putting a lot more water in here, but I'll mix this up to start with. Now remember that this is 2 pies. And also remember, don't work your pie dough to death. Okay, so it's starting to get sticky in some places. Keep mixing until it's kind of consistent. And now I'm going to turn it out onto the board. Okay, now there's still not much body to it. We'll just keep folding it together. All this dry stuff. Okay, so this is not really going to roll as it is. Get that dry stuff in the middle. So I can add a little bit of water. It goes from too dry to too sticky pretty fast. And this is the part where you can overwork the dough. Because all the time you're working, you're smashing those chunks of fat down smaller and smaller. Okay, that's pretty good, and it's plenty sticky. So as I work, I'll start reintroducing flour. to make it workable. Because you can see it just sticks to the surface now. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to take that and put it in kind of a consistent shape, because I need to eyeball half. Take half of that, set it aside. I don't want any sticky bits on the board, because I'm going to flour this board now. Typically I would use all-purpose flour for this part, but this bag is nearly empty, so this is what I'm using for the pie. So I'll set this cup of flour there, and that'll be what I use for laying this out. Get that in a ball. Now I'll start to roll that. Now we start to roll. I'm going to try to keep it reasonably circular. What I don't want to happen, I can feel it sticking to the table there now. See, there's no more flour there. So I can either, I could do this, I could do that. It's okay to use plenty of flour now, because you're not trying to make the dough stick together. You're trying to make the dough not stick to the table. I think I should have cut that in half again. Because it's too big. That's okay. I'm going to roll this out for the bottom. You just kind of have to go by feel. If you can't make much of an impression in it, indentation in it, it's getting thin. If you can still see indentation with light pressure, then it's pretty thick. I'm going to cut this here. See what happens. I don't make this stuff but once a year, and then I forget what I'm doing. Okay. If I did it right, it shouldn't be stuck, which it's not. So what I'll do is I'm going to fold that in quarters. Pan. Kind of line up the center with there, and then just unfold it. Okay. There. Push it down into the pan. Pie plate. Okay. I can get rid of some of this extra now, but I don't need to trim it accurately at this point. And I'll set this aside. So I'm making two pies. Generally I'll make two bottoms, then I'll make the fillings, then I'll come back and I'll make two tops. So this should be enough for another bottom. And it's a little tricky because there's more flour on it, but I think I can still do it. It's handy to get it round before you start. It's good when it moves a little bit, it's not stuck down. See, the top is getting tacky. can fold that up again. It's a little dry underneath, or a little wet, I should say. Just make sure I don't tear it. A little off center. Make sure it fits down in there, but don't tear it. All right. That's my two bottoms. Now we do apples. Okay, as my wife washes the apples, I'll show you this nifty gadget. This peels the apples, cores them, and slices them. And no, it doesn't work perfectly every time. But I think it's faster than just doing it by hand, and it's kind of entertaining. This is a suction cup system that's supposed to hold it to the table, and it kind of does, but it doesn't last. So I end up holding it down with my hand. All right. So I'll stick the apple on here in the center, and regardless of if the center is off center in the apple, I have to line the core up straight so you can see the apple is, off center. And I let the knife go free. This is a curved knife. See, it's let go already. I just have to hold it down. You should be able to see it. Yeah, it's jammed already. Gets a piece of apple in it, and then it doesn't. Yeah. Perfect cut.
Yay.
Yeah, it was just too far back. Wasn't taking enough off. Nice thing about doing it this way too is the slices are a uniform thickness, so they'll cook uniformly. And if you're cutting it by hand, you invariably get a few pieces that are thicker than others. You might end up with some crunchy chunks of apple in your pie, which is not the end of the world.
Prove it's real.
Yep. But this thing's pretty entertaining to watch when it's working. And frustrating to watch when it's not. So 8 apples per pie is what that's like. All right, yes, we need to get some lemon juice on here because these will go brown. I don't think it's such a big deal though, because they're brown once they're cooked anyway.
Yeah, that's true.
So a tablespoon of lemon juice. Just splash some over that, because that's what the lemon juice is for. That's good. And then in here, we'll do the rest. The recipe calls for 1/2 cup of granulated sugar and 1/3 cup of brown sugar. Now, I'm not using sugar, I'm using honey. I'm going to put about half. This is a pound of honey, or 500 grams, a little more than a pound. I'm going to put about half of that in there. And then we'll put that in the microwave for a few seconds. 40, 50 seconds. Just so that it's low viscosity. All right, so that's pretty warm, nice and runny. I'm going to throw some apples in here.
You want me to do the spices?
Yes.
Teaspoons?
Well, we got them? Okay, teaspoon of cinnamon. I just want to disperse some of this honey while it's hot. So we'll get the spices in here. Teaspoon of cinnamon. Oh,
Quarter allspice.
piece of apple hit the floor.
Quarter allspice.
I think it's a quarter nutmeg too.
Yep.
Now you're saying, well, there's lots of moisture in here, and you're right. And that's one of the things you need to take into account when you're converting a recipe from sugar to honey. There's definitely a lot of moisture in here. So we want to get about half the apples in that bowl, leaving half in the other bowl. It's kind of neat how that works.
The recipe says to cook the apples.
I know, that's Ann Olson's recipe. Ann Olson has a good tip on how to take care of some of the moisture in the apples. I just don't bother to. She actually takes half the apples and basically sautés them. She boils off the water from the apples. She cooks them in a frying pan. I think that's a great tip. But I feel I can take care of the moisture with my own little trick here in a minute. Okay, so I think this is what we want for one pie.
Yep.
So let's go over and make that pie. So this is my trick to absorb the water, the moisture. Put a nice layer of oatmeal in there. Pretty sure it was my Auntie Beth who told me about that. I asked her, she was good at making pie, and I asked her, how do you make your pie? It doesn't get soggy on the bottom. She said, you put oatmeal in there, in the bottom, before you put the filling in. So get the apples in. I know you can't see anything but my arm. Seems like a lot, but it definitely cooks down. Okay. Don't be skimpy. Don't be afraid with the oatmeal, because it'll degrade completely. You'll never notice that there's been oatmeal in your apple pie. Now, to be specific, this is quick cooking oats, quick oats. Okay, let's go for the second one up. Now I'm going to try and get most of the apples in here before I dump the moisture in it, so I have lots of juice to pour over. Okay, so now we got 2 of these. We've started the oven up at 400 degrees. And now I make a couple of tops. This will just be a bother, so take that off now. So you can see me putting all this flour all over the pie crust, the dough, and we need to get the dough to stick together here at the edges. So what I've done is taken a little bit of water, maybe a 1/4 cup or so, and cracked an egg into it and just beat it up with a fork. Okay, it's a nice egg wash. And that's your pie. You just squeeze it all the way around. It goes fast at this point, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And then my little paring knife, I just go right around it. And that's the pie. So, again, we've got flour over the top of this to make that nice and golden. I'm going to wash that with the egg as well.
I can't finish the sugar.
Don't be skimpy. Everybody likes eggs. Cooked eggs. It's going to be nice cooked egg in there. Now we need to let it expand. So we've made all that nice pie dough, and now poke it full of holes. Now I've got some coarse sugar here. It's kind of, I don't know what you call it, but it's coarse. It's not exactly white. But I just sprinkle that on top. It's kind of lumpy. Sprinkle that on top, and that makes a beautiful, beautiful crust. Okay. All right, we'll do this again. Wouldn't have been as bad if I had got on straight. Okay, a little bit of a anomaly, but
It's
gonna look a lot worse when I'm done with it. Egg wash it again, all the way to the edges.
Is it brown?
Mm-hmm. Well, you're cooking an egg, so nice golden brown. Done. Okay, in the oven they go. And the instructions are 400 degrees for 10 minutes, 375 for an additional 40 to 50 minutes. This is a recipe my mother used to do when she made pie with the leftovers. Get the leftovers back together. They're still looking pretty good. Roll them out again. I'll try to roll it a little bit oblong this time. Kind of square, kind of longer than it is wide. Okay, it's a little thick, but I can't go any farther. I'm running out of space here. Now you can use butter or margarine here. I'm using margarine just because the butter I have is been in the fridge and it's too hard to mush around on the dough. You just tear the dough. Just cover it with butter or margarine. Don't go quite to the end. Okay, brown sugar. Just cover it, doesn't have to be thick. The butter kind of helps you with that, margarine in this case. It sticks it to the dough. You probably guessed by now what's going on here. Maybe not though. Okay. Cinnamon.
Takes a long time. You have to hit it.
And this is how we roll. Just patting it to make it tight and stick together and everything. We get closer here. I'm going to get that egg wash back. I'm going to egg wash the edge here, so that when I'm done, the end kind of sticks to the roll. Okay, so I'm going to take that seam side down, just going to pat it a little bit, make it a little bit oblong. And then I'll cut it in about 1 inch segments. I'll tell you, these are a treat. I grew up on a farm, and so these became known in our family as pigtails, because they're all curled up like a pig's tail. So when the pie is done, the oven is still hot, these go on a cookie sheet, bake them in the oven, and I can't tell you how hot or how long because I don't know. You just have to cook them until they're sort of done. But it's easy to overcook them, so don't go too crazy. That's it. And here they are, fresh out of the oven. So these need to cool. Even if I was going to eat them now, you really need to let them cool for a good hour or more. But these aren't going to be eaten today. Might not get into them until tomorrow or the next day. So, but they'll keep. We can put them in the fridge if we need to, and enjoy them anytime. Now that the pies are out, pigtails are in the oven, and we should be able to enjoy those this evening for a snack, perhaps. And I want to thank you for watching this pie baking video. It's a little bit different from my channel, but you know, it's the Christmas holidays and there's not much else going on here. I wanted to show you something that has become really handy in my life. I saw one of these that someone had made a few years ago, and so I set to work in my wood shop, and I built two actually, one for me and one as a gift. People always ask me, oh, make one of those for me. Well, there's a lot of work involved, and there's a surprising amount of material involved, so it would be very expensive. I think it cost me $50 in materials or something to build one of these, but regardless, I'll show you what this is. I call this a pie caddy, and pies, cakes, whatever you've got to store or transport, it's got a nice handle on top. It's made of what's called Baltic birch plywood. It's a very nice plywood. It's got no voids, thin laminations. I put a shellac finish on it, and I should shellac it again and start to show its age. However, this is what the deal is. I've got an oak handle and an oak kind of a lift knob thing here. So I can open this up, and it has removable shelves here. So what I can do is, let's see, I'll start at the bottom. And then I can take my pie, I can put my pie in here, and that's just about the right spacing. You can see it's been well used. So take that one out. I'll put my other pie in here. Then I have space. I can put, you know, candies or a cake or something else in here, or just put the shelves back in for storage. So anyway, that's a really handy device for the season. It's nice to just store the pies so that you know you can stack them. They don't use up as much space, and if you need to go to a dinner party or something, you can then transport your goodies in the box. So that's the pie caddy, or my brother calls it pie shed. So it's pie shed too.